guidance counselor role in bullying at school. Basically, she's going to tell us what guidance counselors do, what we as parents can expect from them. This is her role in school, and she's a qualified guidance counselor. I will introduce our next speaker later, so as to not overload the information. However, I would like to thank our caterer, Eddie Ennion, and her granddaughter, I forgot her name, Ruth. Yeah, they've been catering for us last week, and we had beautiful Ethiopian cuisine, and she's going to offer us beautiful Ethiopian coffee as well. Amazing. So she's our caterer. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much yourself for being here. And I also want to thank our sister Fasya and Narisara. Sorry, is that the name?
Narisara.
Fasya and her colleague, and I apologize that I did not practice the name today. Thank you so much for coming to take care of our children. And thank you, Kendiel. Kendiel is she's part of the Ubuntu Hub team, and so is Eddie. So Eddie's our project manager, and Kendiel is our everybody coming, doing everything for us. So yes, community champion, that's right. And my name is Elma Behring, and that's, thank you.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
My name is Jawahir Ahmed. I'm a counselor. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I'm Wellingtonian. I've been here in Wellington nearly 30 years. I'm known for many things, but I will just make short. I am a counselor and also part of the ACCW. I'm going to present it to you today. Guidance and counselor's role at schools and what we do. So first I would like to define what counseling is. So counseling is a method that helps one to reflect about themselves and issues that they have better. And when someone having anxiety, we often have like anxieties when we are going about our life is daily, maybe going to work and having job interview, maybe going to having deep issues that require counseling, maybe health issues. So there's many issues as to why one might seek counseling. And however, today I will limit to guidance and counselor and what counselors do at school. So counselors at school often deal with young people. So every school have a counselor in Wellington at the moment, which is essential, and that is why, and that's the reason, because nowadays we have a lot of younger people going through a lot of issues in schools, and one of these things are bullying. So what is bullying? So bullying can be physically hitting, punching, and other form of abuse, stealing from others, bite-backing, and also abuse, swearing, and also saying harsh words, mocking, and so on. Also by texting. As you know, social media nowadays, younger people face a lot of bullying, and that's like cyberbullying, saying stuff, and this leads to younger people really having a lot of issues. And one of these issues is like suicide. When someone gets bullied, they feel like, why this person is doing this to me. And the reason why someone might bully others is because maybe they have been bullied themselves in the past, and they're going through deep issues, and they are unhappy at times. But bullying can lead to really severe issues. And I have a daughter, 17-year-old, and she was bullied in school, which made us to change school for her and take her to another school. She was supposed to complete school last year, and she was really academic. And when she was bullied in her school, in high school, she was bullied because of her color, because of her ethnicity, because of who she was. Even though she was born in New Zealand, she was bullied really bad severely, which made her to go to hospitalized, to go to hospital for a while, and to made her unwell. And because she was really academic, when she was going through the issue that she went through, she didn't need to go back to school to pass her exam. So she passed her exam by using her mocking tests. And when she get back to school, she was picked up quickly, and she just completed high school and ready to go to uni. But this is like one of the examples how bullying can have effect on someone's life. And New Zealand also has one of the highest bullying number, which I will talk about a bit later. So why do people bully, which I already mentioned? One might bully someone due to differences in socioeconomic status, academic status, and gender, and race and religion. All of those points, I have been actually called to schools in Wellington to counsel younger people who've been exposed to bullying due to race. One of the things was that I met a group of young girls who were refugee and migrant background who was unable to settle in school due to their outlook. And outlook because I meant maybe they were hijab like me because of their color. And for 8 weeks, I was counseling those girls. And someone when they maybe look different and they can't afford expensive clothing, someone who doesn't simulate or doesn't look the same can be bullied. Because kind of like nowadays you can be bullied actually for everything. Bullies, they pick their victim very carefully. Imagine you walk into a room and someone already know that they dislike you and they say, look who's walking in. They already know, so it's easy for someone to spot who they want to attack and bully. Maybe they come from also difficult environment. If someone been abused in young age or come from a harsh environment, they are prone to attack people because they're already upset. And that's also someone we cannot blame. That when we say that, as professionals, we are clearly attacking where children came from, and that is unfair. I don't agree with that. But then let's not make a mistake, because it is true sometimes when children come from a harsh environment, when there is abuse or there is a fighting, they're exposed into that difficult, harsh environment, they are prone to take that outside world. And sometimes that's what actually happens. Another thing is that may be also bullied and they're lashing out. So when you are bullied yourself, then that is what you learn. And most of the behavior that we output is a learned behavior. You can put that back to the world. So research shows that New Zealand have the highest bullying numbers. So 30% of the year 9 students are being bullied. And there is some differences that I haven't done. I have a doctor who was here today, so when I was doing this, I was like, oops, what is there? So I haven't actually done my differences. So if you take a snapshot and read that later, it will be a good idea. So what's counseling do? The guidance counselors, they investigate bullying. So when we have a student that been bullied in class, we call them. And sometimes we call in a group. It's a group work. We call the bully and the bully, the person who bullied the young person and the bully, and then evidence. We look also for evidence. So we may also invite other young kids. So maybe 4 or 5 children, we say, okay, what happened to us? So it ends up as a discussion rather than blaming someone. We want to find out, and at times it's really uncomfortable to put what I have noticed while I was doing this. When you put 4 children together and you question them, the ones who bullied will not say much, and also one who bullied bully the other one will not say much because they're scared what might happen to them later outside. So they're all quiet. It's hard to get out any information. So you need to be patient. And the other thing is that they allow the child to come and to report anonymously. So during the day, any student can come and write a note and put under the guidance counselor's door. And we read that note, and then we call in. And then when the situation escalates, we also tell the principal. But what happens with the principal when the issue reaches to principal, that child who bullied, the other child will get 3 days stand out, like they will leave school. And that affects also their education. So when you bully someone and your parent doesn't know, if you continuously doing that, you will get a chance at the beginning. They will ask you what happened, but no excuse. There is no reason that you need to bully other child in the school. But if there is a physical, that is where it gets really serious. And they send you home for 3 days, as I mentioned. But then, as I also mentioned, it will affect the education of that child. And sometimes we also call the parent, but because we are counselors, it's unethical for us to discuss one issue unless they allow us to tell someone, to tell the parent. So it's really difficult. So I'm a mother of 4, and as a counselor, this is what really always made me trigger. I always wanted to call the parent. I tell the child, you like to call your parent? Do they want to come to the counseling too? And sometimes they say no. And here is why. And actually I made about not last night. So I want to share this note with you. One of the reasons is that one of the kids that I counsel, I have counseled hundreds of children that in ethnic background, refugees and migrants. Like most of the things that they told me, it will get difficult for them. They don't want the mother to know because they will think that, okay, you're not going to school, what's going on in your life? And we have to understand our children. One of the things that we can do to prevent is talking and knowing what happened to your child. Each day when your child go out and they come back, ask about their day, ask how school was. So that's that. And I also want to give you some reading a bit later what counseling, so you have good information. So yeah, they give also the students license to learn, as to not to bully and to be sensible to others and respect, and also they call the parent, as I mentioned. What can we do to prevent? Parents should talk to the children about bullying and how they can stand up for themselves safely, because you can't fight back. Don't do the same. Tell your child not to do the same. Because remember, bullying is bad, and kids who bully other kids bully because they came from difficult positions, and also they have anger. So your child always should walk away, but learn how to prevent and not to do the same as the bully to stay safe. Another thing is to keep the communication open and encourage kids to continue to do open communication, encourage the kids to continue to do what they love. Sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses. I asked my supervisor, I have a Kiwi supervisor, and he is one of the oldest, not by age, but experience. He was counseling Vietnam War veterans. and he is a PhD, and he is one of my supervisor. I have two. And one day I asked him about this subject and how can I support younger people and how actually we can prevent counseling. And he actually right now he's a counselor, he counsels students as well. And he told me the best way you can stop a bully to stop bullying you is to agree with them. Agree with them? Like what about if they say, you know, you're bad, you know, like I'm saying, okay, thank you. He said no. But what you need to do is you sit down with the bully and you smile and you tell them, you know what? Actually, you might be right. Don't say you are right. You say you might be right. And if you are a bit chubby and you lose a race, and they say, oh, you know what, your shoes, you too big, you can't run. You say, yeah, actually, I can't. Maybe you're right. Just smile, because that way, then you putting them off. They will not continue. They will go and look for next person who is actually, you know, more susceptible and more soft and can cry, and then they can continue. So it's always best to say, maybe you're right, I need to look into that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't say, no, you hurt me. Why? Don't just say you are right, and they will just say, no, I can't do anything about it. So there is that's why I need my God, I need to look there. I'm actually legally blind. So what services are available to prevent counseling? So within New Zealand, the Ministry of Education set up a bullying-free school framework. It's a 9 elements, but just to mention a few, I just put 5 up there. If anyone of you interested in reading the whole model, we will bring close and you can take a snapshot to it. So that is to enable student leadership, positive school culture, gathering and analyzing data. That means all schools, they collect data and analyze how many schools in the country being bullied. But as I mentioned, New Zealand also have the highest of bullying number. 39%, did I say, was bullied in schools, and also have the highest suicide rate. And if you recall, I think it was late last year, there was on the news, Canterbury College, I don't know the college name, there was young girls, they were bullied, severely bullied, and they wanted to take their lives. So I saw bullying can cause harm, and also to involve parents. But I have been counselor and been around schools now more than three and a half years, and most of my time I have noticed teachers and principals, they wanted the parent to involve, but sometimes our culture, and also, I don't know about you guys, but my culture, we are not always involved in our children's life. We don't daily question, daily go to school. The best thing to support your child is to have that connection, not only the teacher, but the dean, and also to put it in writing. If anything goes wrong and your child is coming home and you don't know what's happening and they're not talking to you, and because they're scared, you might be saying, well, you're not going to school, you're just being fighting people. We have to stop this. We have to actually involve our children's lives. My kids are born here in New Zealand, and it was really hard for me at the beginning because I didn't know much. But as my children grow and as I mature a bit, I learned the importance of talking to the teacher every day. So this is, if I give one advice, is our duty actually to involve. And even though we cannot stop bullying, I went a couple of years ago to a few schools and I asked them, what's your policy about bullying? I want to read the policy that you have about bullying. None of the school that I asked actually gave me any written policy. Their response was that I needed to talk to the principal And sometimes when things reach up to the principal, that's when things get worse. But you need something in writing, so you can't respond to that. That is why the Ministry of Education came up with the 9 elements that I mentioned, 5 of them. Feel free to read that. So, any questions? Now I'm happy to take your questions. That will be my presentation. But before I take your questions, I will give you something to read, and then we can discuss that.
Yeah, so I have a question. So that statistic that you gave us about New Zealand being one of, or even the country with the highest incidence of bullying, when was that established? When was this discovered? Was it some research that came out recently, or?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Ministry of Education, they constantly collect data, and this data can be any time. Last year, 5 years ago, this year, so they're constantly watching and keeping eye to all schools.
All right. Yeah, no, the reason why I asked is because I then heard you saying that, you know, in your work as a counselor, you've been to a few schools, and it seems like many of these schools don't actually have a written policy on bullying. So I was wondering, is it because of the statistics that now this framework has now come out and the government is trying to pursue this? Or
Yes.
So it's because of the statistics? That's why?
Yes, absolutely, because they realized that this is a really huge issue for schools, and then the government took it, the responsibility in terms of gathering data and implementing rules that support and stops these incidents in schools. But the schools are also open to talk to you, and the best way to do it is to talk to the teacher, the dean, and it really escalates to something bigger than the principal. But sometimes when the issue reaches to the principal, that child gets 3 days standoff, which I have talked about. And sometimes they make a decision to move that child to another school, but then it's also hard because there's no school that taking that child because they already know the history is in the file. So it's hard. It affects that child's education and also your child's safety. So the best way to resolve is actually to have a meeting with maybe the other parent and to put that in issues.
How is your daughter? Is she okay now?
My daughter is, she's looking forward to go to uni.
Very good, very good. So that's good to hear. Secondly, you changed the school. I'm going specific.
Yes. Anything.
You changed schools for your daughter, which is great. But how did you work it so that she wouldn't be a target? Like, when she was at that school, things happened. What was the difference in approach to say, okay, my daughter, you're going to this school, how are you going to, because you're going to meet, there are idiots everywhere, isn't it? Okay, there are bullies everywhere. So how did you manage that? What was the new advice for your daughter?
So when I found out my daughter was actually struggling for a year, and as I mentioned, she was really good at school, like her homework and everything, so she would not talk to us, but I knew she was going through something. I went into school and confronted her in school. And I said, look, because she told me she came to the other end when things were really bad. Sometimes, we say now this is the time I need to say something. So I think that was the time for her. She came and she talked to us, and that's the time I approached the school and say, look, it's not working for my daughter. I need some rules, and I'm going to move away from this school. I need you to tell me what went wrong. And it took about a month or two communication by email, and really difficult sometimes in the system. Even if you're a counselor, psychologist, or a doctor, the system is still a system. The system is really difficult, and I didn't felt that we've been heard, and it was not safe for my daughter to continue. So I decided that I would take my daughter to another school, which my other family went before. But before we get there, my daughter got sick because her situation and bullying was so severe that she needed to actually end her life, and it was taking too much out of her. So it took her time to come back to normality to attend another school. But it was a big decision. I think sometimes that's the only decision parent can make. Yeah.
I would like to ask a question. So you say that sometimes children do not want the parents to get involved, so they will keep the bullying to themselves for a while. That fear is based on the child do not want to be targeted at school. So what advice would you have for the parents if they find eventually that the child has been bullied? What advice would you have for the parents so that you know that the wishes of the child is protected? The child does not want mom to overact, because what advice do you have for us?
Yeah. So before I answer your question, I want to just add something that's connected. So sometimes also they don't want us as counselors to talk to anyone else, and also by ethical framework and principle we are bound not to discuss anyone's issue with anyone else. So your child might be talking to us about stuff and might not want you to know. At the same time, they don't want the bully to be exposed, or because you already mentioned things will get worse for them. So they are stuck in a hard place. It's difficult for them. That is why there is a need for us to involve our child and daily have that relationship, daily questioning. So the best way to answer your question is actually to keep upping the communication at home, on the table, dinner table, to keep talking and say, indirectly investigate and talk about bullying, talk about how their day been, who are their friends. Because sometimes our kids will come home and say, Mom, I got a new friend. And guess what? Sometimes those friends are not the real friends. It's someone that don't even know their name or their family, what sports they play. They never invited to their house. And maybe they're just eating lunch with someone a couple of days, and they don't have that really intimate intimacy, and they will think they are friends. So that is why we need to have that connection with our children, who are their friend, who they call friend, who they talking to, what's being said to them in their social media and phones.
Would you also encourage, just one more question, sorry. I don't want to. Would you also encourage then parents to have relationship with other parents should they find that the child has a tendency to spend time with one particular child? Would you encourage open relationship, making an effort to make a relationship with another parent?
That's a good idea. Funny you say that. So a few years ago, about 10, 15 years ago, my kids were growing up, and they were all in colleges and intermediates and primary. It was really uncomfortable for me because the way maybe I wear hijab and it was look different, just approaching other families and just like, hey, buddy, can you come to my house for a coffee and talk? So you will see you are a bit different. You will see the environment. When you're picking up your child, you're not you're still a Kiwi, you're still a human being, you're still a beautiful person, but you don't know everyone, and you will be looked in a certain way. Because I've been to a lot of meetings with the community, as you know. I've been working with the community more than 30 years, and we talked about variety of issues. And one of these things was picking up your school and how you interplay. interact and how you've been stared at, if you like, and looked at. So sometimes it's uncomfortable situation. You just want to pick your child and say, okay, bye-bye, I'm not here to talk to anyone. So it's just actually make the relationship with everyone, and knowing everyone is difficult, but it's also really important. I used to babysit in those environments. I met a doctor her husband was a surgeon, and she was also pediatric, and she was also one of my child's doctor. We became friends, and I used to babysit, and my son used to go to their house. They used to live in Newland, and sometimes you meet, people. But what I heard from the community, sometimes 10 years, 20 years ago, it was difficult to have that open, easy relationship with every other parent. But if you know a family that your child is comfortable with and they want to make friends, just get to know them, and but also build your child to be resilient and strong, and in a safe way to stand up and learn his way out rather than depending on other people to look out for them.
So, what you say is really true. And the one thing that I've also noticed in this country, I've been here for more than 20 years now. Yes, we might think we've now acquired the key way of doing things, but that's not the way. And our children will still go through that same cycle of being segregated and being bullied. And it is forums like these, when we come together and we bring our children, they get to know each other, it's much easier for them to confide as children to other children. And it also provides them another platform of sharing experiences and ideas of how to cope. Similarly with us too as adults, some of us might have gone through the experience, and some of us still have children who are growing who may end up in that experience. We now know at least how to deal with such situations, and in terms of getting our children to open up and become more like friends, really, because this is a very isolated place, and if we don't have frank conversations such as these, we might think everything is good until it happens to you. And when it does, you are not prepared for anything because you just thought, oh, everything is good. Because first impressions from this country is very friendly, everyone is smiling. Then later on, once you peel off that smile, you see what's underneath there. And more often than not, it's very ugly. And the higher up you go in terms of your work and your progress, you find that there is a glass ceiling there that you can't go through. That is where we need to come together and say, guys, we've been here now for quite a while, and we find we can't go beyond this stage. What do we need to do? So we need to have these conversations going, encourage others to come to these forums and have these conversations. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Any more questions? Awesome. That important information. Any other question before I pass to my colleague who want to?
Maybe we'll still talk later. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay.
I have a question, but not really a question. It's just curiosity. So back home, we're taught to stand up for ourselves.
Yes.
So in situations where you have a bullying case, I'm just trying to imagine what my dad would do. Like,
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You could not come home with that shame that you've been bullied and
yes.
your tail between your legs, and
yes.
So he would want you to go and address the situation.
Absolutely.
So is this something we should be looking at doing here, or
absolutely not. Absolutely
do you want
not.
us to take another approach?
Absolutely. Always, it's very important to approach any situation calmly and smartly. And you're a doctor, you know. And one of the most interesting things that I would like to share with you in regards to that, I met a young boy, and he was my client, and I was still a student at that time. It was my second year. And the second year you need to go around and do every school and just bring hours and watch on how to counsel. So I met a young man and he said, you know, I've been bullied and my parents know this and I'm really scared and they attack me. And as I'm listening, I didn't know what to say. I'm still also a junior counselor, and I say, okay, so what do you think? Because we learned just to keep the conversation going and want to hear from him. And he said, you know what? I talked to my dad, and my dad said, because they play sport, be his team. That day I learned a lot about that young man. Now I am like with all my enemies. Like if someone doesn't like me, I like to, they say keep your enemy close. That was 13-year-old, and I think we have to be smarter to protect ourselves, not to submit ourselves to people who want to harm us, but to stay safe and not to do the Africa way, because that's what my mom will come with me and I actually went to several schools upset and want to talk to the kids and the mothers and do something, but then I said no, I'd rather talk to the school. So yeah, approaching smart, being doctor, is the best.
So building on what Wallace said, I remember when I was at school, I was in a boarding house or boys' school, and one of my best friends was getting bullied, and I think I eventually got to the point where he did turn around and he almost broke his bully's nose, essentially. And then he got sent, but then I remember the hostel manager being like, I'm glad you stood up for yourself, and I remember even then it's that sort of thing of stuff should happen before it gets to that point, right? That's the kind of, I guess the kind of takeaway is it shouldn't have to get to the point where someone has to take that action, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, sister. Homeschooled her 3 sons, and at least one of them is a professional, one is in university, and one is still at school. So,
Wow.
yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Afternoon. Is it afternoon? Oh my God, it's afternoon. Okay, my name's Denise. I'm from Uganda, and I'm a mother of 3. My crowd's not here because 2 of them are adults, and the other one has run away with daddy. So my oldest is 26, and my second is 21, and my youngest is 9. And they've all been homeschooled at different intervals, different lengths, and so on. And what I'm going to do here is to share what you need to know about homeschooling in New Zealand, but also what my experience has been and how my boys have come through to the end. I'll start with homeschooling is not for everyone, that's for sure. And homeschooling, even within my home, did not fitted my kids differently. So it is something that, as I talk through it, you will decide whether it's for you or whether it's helpful to you. The other thing that I have learned is that you don't have to homeschool all through. You can decide to homeschool for a little bit, for when you need it, and then you ease back very easily. New Zealand makes it very easy to ease back into normal school, and when it's not working for you, ease back out. It's really, really flexible. What is homeschooling? Okay. So I'll just I'll introduce you to homeschooling. We'll talk through the advantages of homeschooling. I will be very honest with the challenges because it is not smooth sailing all the time, like anything. It's pros and cons. I'll also mention the help that homeschooling families have available. There's also financial support that is available for homeschooling families, something that most people don't even know about. And then I'll talk you through very quickly how to apply for an exemption, because before you can start to homeschool, legally you have to ask for an exemption from the Ministry of Education, and I'll take you through that, and then I'll end with my personal experience. Oh goodness, okay, there's definitely something I am doing very wrong. Right, so homeschooling, at least in New Zealand, is the practice of parents or guardians educating their children within their home rather than the traditional school. So any form of education that is separate from the school, that you're not leaving to the school, is actually homeschooling. And it's legal and it's allowed by the government. There is a process that you have to go through, obviously, like all things, but it is an avenue for parents. Hey, I've got it. So there are lots of homeschooling styles, and these are just some of them. There's homeschooling is basically a way to educate, and people have different ways to educate. There's the structured one, where you're basically having school, only difference is you're in your home. So you're using your textbooks, you're using what they would have used in school, only that you're doing it in your home. There's child-led, which is sort of like unschooling, and very, very popular among our Pakeha friends, where the child actually says, this is what I want to do. And you go down a rabbit hole with it. So if your child, for example, is very into fixing cars, for example, you decide, okay, that's what we'll do for the next 6 months. Let's get an old car, bring it home, and fix it. And you basically do that. Or your child decides, I want to be an author. So you're like, okay, what's the topic? And you go down that rabbit hole, you actually write, you go through the draft, you go through the publication, you actually publish the book, you market the book, you do the art within the book. You actually go down the rabbit hole of actually doing that thing that the child is passionate about. That's an option. There's also curriculums that are very Christian influenced. I've put in a few. ACE is very common. And a lot of us, even in Africa, a lot of people use ACE, especially families who homeschool. They get booklets in different subjects, and then you go through the different subjects using those booklets. There's also a baker, which is quite pricey. Bob Jones University, that's BJU. So there are many curriculums so what happens is that you purchase these curriculums. They come in a huge big box every year, and then you basically, they provide all the subjects, they provide all the materials, they provide all the textbooks, and you basically follow that. With the advent of when 2020 came around and we had COVID, a lot of parents started to use these curriculums because it was a way of actually educating their children without going to schools and so on. So it really became an easy way to get education. They're very specialized philosophies. We know about the Waldorf school and the Montessori school. You can actually do that within your home, and you can subscribe to those. Charlotte Mason is another one. Apologia is another one. There's a very specific philosophies of how to educate your child. And then there's the eclectic, where you mix and match, and I mixed and matched a lot because all my boys were very different. And so what I did is, depending, you know your children. And so for each child, I kind of have followed a very different route for each of them to fit their individual needs. Okay, what's the legal requirement before you homeschool, you need, as I've mentioned before, you need to apply for an exemption. There's a form on the Ministry of Education website, and all you have to do is Google homeschool exemption, and it will come up. There's a form that you complete. Essentially, what the form wants you to do is to develop an education plan. What you need to let the ministry know is how are you going to educate your child. They do not, you just have to show that your child will learn something. Basically, all you need to show is that there is some structure, even if it is the unschooling route that I mentioned. You just have to show that that child has some structure around your learning. There are ways that you can evaluate what your child has learned. Say, for example, the example I gave about publishing a book. You have to say that, you know, in month 3 we will reach draft. In month 4 we will achieve this. In month 5 we'll talk about marketing of the book, and so on and so forth. Basically, you need to show the ministry that your child is just not going to just sleep or watch cartoons all day. That's all they want. And they want to show how you're going to be involved. So you might not be the one teaching your child. You can subscribe to online classes. You can get a tutor to come in. You can go to the local community college. It doesn't matter. You just need to show that this is how my child is going to learn. And by the end of the year, if they started from point A, by the end of the year they will be at Z, or they'll be advanced in some sort of way. So that's all they need from you. And then you send the plan to the ministry. It's not a scary process really, because if they lack any information or if they feel there are any gaps, they will let you know. They'll either turn you down, and you can always call and say, was there anything missing in my application? Is there a way I could have improved it? Can someone help me? And they will walk you through. Especially when 2020 came, lots of parents switched to homeschooling. Especially if you had kids who had compromised, compromised health, or you yourself were compromised. There were parents who had cancer or whatever, and you didn't want to send your child to school. So they became really accommodating of that option, because it was a reality for a lot of parents. So when you do decide to embark on this journey, you can actually ask for help. Apart from the ministry, who are always open to be asked, you can ask people like myself and other parents who homeschool. The homeschooling community is the most friendly community because we know what it is to struggle alone. And for people to give up earning an income to educate their children, they are devoted. You don't take it lightly. This is a full-time job for me. So I obviously, when you come to me, I know that we are like minded. So I will take my time out to help you. And that's the way that most schooling communities are, where we help each other, because it's a very hard road to walk alone.
Just a quick question. Maybe preempting this.
Yeah.
So is homeschooling only for your own children?
No, like I said, guardians. So you can never, if Uncle so-and-so is really good at maths, or is really good at science or physics or whatever, and I have no physics born in my body, I can always call Uncle so-and-so to step in.
So we can create a group here.
Absolutely, 100%, and that's what most people do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, did I talk too much. It's here, but it's not coming up.
You need to maybe just pull the cable out and
So when you send in the plan, the Ministry of Education. So the Ministry of Education, you have to wait for the approval. So ideally, it takes between 2 to 3 weeks before they give you. Oh, does it? Okay. So you have to wait for the approval, and once you're approved, then you. Some parents, like me, I didn't wait for the approval. While I waited, because my child had to, start, and a lot of the time, there's an interval between, your child getting their headspace out of school into homeschooling. So you can ease into it slowly. It's like you're on holiday, and then you slowly start introducing subjects and introducing structure and so on. Also, if you want to subscribe to those curriculums that I mentioned, sometimes it takes a while. Most of them are in America, so sometimes it takes a while for them to be posted to get to you. So depending on what you're using, it's to use that time wisely, basically, to start preparing for what's coming next. When you get the approval and you start, ideally you're supposed to report regularly to the ministry. I will tell you right now, I've been homeschooling for years. No one has ever come to see my children or to check or to even, all they want to know is, are you still homeschooling? If you say yes, that's it. But what should happen ideally is that you need to have someone to come to see, are you actually doing what you promised you would do? But as we know, systems don't always work the way. So it's really you, the parent, the onus is on you to make sure that you give quality to your child. Don't depend on the ministry. It doesn't always work. And I suppose it also depends. Some towns are better. Auckland is way more organized than Wellington, so it doesn't always follow. What are the advantages? You can customize your education. Like I said, you have options. You can do whatever suits your child. There's flexibility in that you can homeschool anywhere. We can homeschool in the library, at the beach, at home. For me, what's important is information entering and is it staying. It's not even, is he dressed in pajamas? Because sometimes that's just our cultural upbringing that brings in this rigid thing. Sometimes it's more important that they learn what they're meant to learn and they become better people, better citizens. I love personally homeschooling because we can be cultural. I can talk about Uganda and I tell my children who we are, where we came from, and the beauty of my culture. And I teach them to be proud of who they are because they will not get this anywhere else. And I feel that for children who grow up here, they're not connected to the continent. And it is something that they miss. They don't even know that they're missing it. But they lose themselves, and because they want to be like the people who are around them so much, they lose themselves in that. And I feel grounding them is important. And I will tell you my experience with that and my struggles with that, because it has been successful in places, but I think that's very vital. Religion is also a very strong thing. My sister will be, that's very core to who you are. And again, that is something that they struggle with outside, depending on whether they are in a Christian school or not, or Muslim school or not, But when they are home, this is who they are. I value that. Of course, we've just talked about bullying and safety. That goes without saying. For me, my story, the reason why I started that journey was because of that. Because I didn't get the solutions I was seeking. And there was interventions, like with people, not her specifically, but there were people who came in to intervene, but the solutions that the schools offered were lacking. And the safety of my children was not guaranteed. And so I personally, my husband and I decided we would live on one salary, and we all know that's not an easy decision. But we decided that the safety of my children was more important. So that was our reason. Half of the reason also was because of health. My last two boys are autistic. And because they're autistic, they're highly functioning autistic. So they're very awkward socially, but very intelligent. They did not fit in. They got picked on. So not only were they a different color and different looking, they also acted differently and awkwardly. And so they were just targets. They were like bees to honey. The bullies sort of even smell them. So we were really, it was a struggle. So for my last two, it was a no-brainer. They were just not going to be safe. Anyway, even moving schools was not going to, it would just be a different brand of bullies. So unfortunately, that was our experience. The other thing, the family bonding and the family values, you reinforce them because every day you start with them. You are with them, you're speaking to them, you reinforce. There are so many opportunities to have conversations. Difficult conversations, happy conversations, because you're with each other all the time. So it was a really good thing that I was able to do that for my children. And obviously, just a reduced exposure to negative influences, because when they're not in your space, they're free fall for the whole world, And so, as they get older, you even have less and less control of what they're exposed to. So, for my children, although they're in and out, especially my oldest got the least homeschool, but still I had enough confidence when I sent him out into the world. I was confident that I had given him enough grounding. You do your best, obviously. But at the end of the day, I felt that there was enough in there for him to survive. Okay, I'll be very honest about the challenges. One of the challenges is lack of socialization. Now, depending on your child, you know your child's character. My last two boys thrived without that constant stimulation because, of course, they're autistic. So they preferred the safety of the cocoon of home. My firstborn is a social butterfly. He loves crowds, loves the audience, he's a performer, he loves people's eyes on him. So he struggled with homeschool. He hated homeschool. And so for him, it was different. Limited resources is a real thing because you have to spend. You're not depending on school. Here, everything in education is free. When the children are depending on you, you have to provide everything. From a pencil to the printing, photocopying. There's a cost. There's also the increased responsibility of the parent. Like I said, we lost one income, and that is the sacrifice that you have to make. And even if it's not you who's doing the education, whoever, the tutor, uncle so-and-so, you still have to, yes, compensate them in some sort of way, So yes, there is some responsibility there, and the organization for the whole thing, that is time. People worry about lack of accreditation at the end of homeschool. Can they go into uni? What will happen? I'll address that in detail. Then challenges with high school. Like with high school, you have they have to do things like the physics with labs. Like the physical things, like carpentry, what happens then? What do I do? So that could be a challenge, and obviously the financial commitment goes without saying. So I'll address each of these challenges and how we address them and what I know about each of them. But this is not the end all, This is just as Denise, answering these issues. Socialization, what I used. We used to go to local playgrounds. They joined the Scouts and Guides. There are lots of community groups that you can join, go along with them. Community groups, I found, are great opportunities to network. Because sometimes as Africans, we're so insular. It's good to let people know, they have a stereotype in their heads about who we are. So community groups was a way of breaking out of that and meeting other people who are not like me. And also having my children be around those people and learn how does mommy handle these situations? You know, how does mommy handle when people are staring at her dreads? You know, and when she's different and she stands out. And how do I carry myself because I'm an example to them? And if I can have conversations very confidently, what am I teaching my children who are watching me? Because children learn by saying, and they copy us. And it is true, you know, the example that you said, that, you know, when we are in these situations, we need to carry ourselves with grace. We're kings, we're queens. And this is what we need to be teaching our children. So if they see you demonstrate what that means, then they're more confident when they have these scenarios for themselves. We also used to go to music groups and sports. Of course, sports is another great way. When they're younger, we organize play dates. We organize field trips with other families, other homeschooling families. That was another way of getting to know people and interacting in their spaces. And homeschool, like I said, homeschooling families are very, very friendly and very supportive. You just have to get one or two with kids of the similar ages and do things together. It was a great way of doing it. Limited resources. Now, Ministry of Education actually gives you resources. There are free resources for homeschooling families that are available, that are given to Ministry of Education. You can also, through the Ministry of Education, organize to, I forget the technical name, but you can work with a school that is close to you to attend some of those classes together. Like the labs, you can actually facilitate it with the Ministry of Education to go for the labs within the zone. So that is something that you can arrange that. Then there are lots of other free learning resources that we all know as homeschoolers, you know. We're like, are you looking for that? There are WhatsApp groups, there are Facebook groups that we share knowledge within the groups. There are also ways that we can share secondhand things. Like if my child has finished grade 5, and I know someone down the line also has another grade 5 coming along, I post on the Facebook group and I say, hey, I have grade 5 curriculum, and someone who's doing grade 6 says, hey, Denise, my boy has just finished. And then, you know, that's how we kind of recycle among ourselves. And that has been, I can't tell you, a great money saver, because we just kind of support each other. There are obviously distance learning providers, and distance learning providers, they're online. So obviously everything is online. So you can get in on there. We already have lots of libraries, museums, culture organizations. Unfortunately, the African people, we do not have. We're not really organized. But yes. That's the truth. But the Chinese and the Indians, they are amazing. So, and the Samoans. So we piggyback on them for us. That's how we've managed to, you know, go for field trips and group things, because those guys they just have things sorted. So instead of waiting for our people, yes.
It's about cultural organizations. Could you tell us a bit more about that? How does it work?
Okay, so it's about immersing the children into different cultures and allowing them exposure to different things. It could be Diwali, you know, and they get involved in the decorations and making things and understanding what does that holiday mean, and it's stuff that they would do at school really, but because they homeschool, you need to tap different people around you so that your child can have the same experience. possibly even richer because we have that flexibility and it's not in a time slot. And so they immerse themselves and they learn about other cultures and other things that probably they wouldn't have otherwise. So it's kind of thinking, what would a school give my child, but I should be doing for him by myself. Yeah. The other thing is the financial strain. So what we do is, like I said, we purchase used books or resources from other people, and they will not be at cost price, you know, the price of a new thing. Obviously, it's obviously subsidized. Some of them actually, most times because people have paid it forward and given their materials to me free, I obviously give the next person free because obviously I didn't pay any money. So that's how you can cut costs. And we also have homeschooling co-ops and associations that are organized. Again, Auckland is way ahead of us. They're very organized, their co-ops are very, very organized. But the Wellington one is starting to get its act together, and we have things that are happening, and so there are lots of things that are offered. For example, we have an end of year camp where the children and their parents can go, and another really great way to network, to even know who's finished what grade and who you need to tap for the school, you know, and also just for the kids to meet each other and spend time together and so on, and develop friendships. Accreditation. Accreditation can be gotten through distance learning providers, and I had my notes here but I can't see them, but off the top of my head, there's Tekura. Tekura is an association that does distance education. Ministry of Education provided, free of charge. Once you're 16 years and under, Tekura can provide all that you need for your education, absolutely free of charge. And it's online, they provide online teachers too, it's available. Reason? Kids have been bullied. Kids have been stood down. Their education doesn't need to stop. So they have provided Tekura as a correspondence school, all the way from Kindi, all the way up. So it's free. Free, 100%. Again, you have to apply, obviously, but yeah, absolutely 100% free. Then there are lots of other homeschooling co-ops, and I'm happy to share this if anybody is interested. To share this presentation with anyone, because all the information is there. I can't access it, I don't know how to operate this, but tech. But there's a whole list with websites of all the institutions that you can go to, and that will give accreditation. This accreditation is actually is accepted at university, and your children can get into university. But on top of that, you can also decide to do Oxford, Cambridge as a form of education. Again, it's a bit pricey. Of course, there's a price to it, but you can get them. There's GCE, the American GCE. Also, you can do that as a homeschooling parent. It's an option, it's available, and it's obviously recognized by all the universities here. So it's really, you can go the route of NCEA with Tekura, but you could also go Oxford, Cambridge, GCE, the American side or the British side. It really is up to you and your pocket, basically. NCEA is free.
Capability, of course.
Oh, of course. So it's really what you can do as a family. Help for homeschooling families. Oh, brilliant, my slide is here. So you're not alone, like I said. Tekura, that's the New Zealand Correspondence School, and that's the website. There's the National Council of Homeschoolers. You can join for free. They give a lot of how-to, walk you through. You can call them at any time and say, oh my goodness, I'm stuck. Do you have any ideas of how I can do ABCD? They're always there. There's a lady called Cynthia Hancock. She is a veteran in homeschooling. I think she homeschooled her children are probably in their 30s now. But she had 8 children who were all homeschooled from the beginning to the end at a time where there was no support with homeschool. So she's a veteran, and she stayed within the community, very, very active. You pay a little price for her services. She can actually help you do the exemption and all that sort of thing at a cost. I think $20 or $30, not a lot. Because again, like I said, it's really more supportive. This community is amazing. And then there's the homeschool curriculums, they're free. I know some of you know about Khan Academy. Khan Academy is a free online academy that offers everything. You don't have to even homeschool. If your child is struggling with a subject, division, fractions, you name it, go to Khan Academy, type it in, you will find a free online lesson. And the teachers are amazing. There's all these other websites again. Some of them are free, some of them at cost, but all of them great supplies for information. So it's not that Denise knows everything in her head and therefore she's teaching everything. I would be lying. I do not. I tap into all these resources. Google is my friend, honestly. And when I train my children when they're old enough, like my 10-year-old right now, I tell him, look for it, Google it. I no longer teach. I'm like, do you want to know about division? Look for a lesson on YouTube. He will look for it. Because one of the things that I love about homeschooling is teaching the children to be resourceful. They quickly learn to manage their time. They quickly learn to find things. They quickly learn that they don't have to look at you all the time for the answers. That is the beauty about it. There's also the option of online tutoring services. Like I said, Denise doesn't know everything. Sometimes I look for specialist tutors. And those 2 websites, those are just examples. But those are sometimes my go-tos. You pay $300 for the whole year, and these people teach your children. Basically, you just log in, you have an account, you log in, your child is taught. So, like I said, it's really up to you. The only reason I stay home, to be honest, is because I'm not supposed to leave a 9-year-old on his own. But he does this on his own. We have a timetable. From this hour to this hour, we have maths, we have English, we have blah, 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 blah. And when he finishes this thing, he goes to the next, he goes to the next, and the day ends. But he knows what he needs to do and when he needs to do. All I have to do is go into his room and say, what are you doing? Have you finished? Did you hand it in? Did you submit? Let me see. You know, what you would do if you were overlooking homework is what I do. Which means I can sit side by him and do my side hustle, and he does his school, and life continues. Especially with the work from home these days. So, Homeschooling New Zealand is another resource, lots of information for you. And obviously another thing that we underlook and we never use even when our children are in school, I really encourage you to do this. There's community education centers that do afternoon classes. Those places are invaluable. They teach practical things like driving, they teach cooking, they teach French, they teach all sorts of things. Look at your local high school, because they usually run in secondary schools. They have these after hours, just not for just children, for you too. Yeah, for you too. But it's a great way to spend quality time. You know, you go with your teenager and you spend a few hours of a week with him, and you will never, the conversations that my husband has had with his children in these places, not that he wants to know Spanish or learn Spanish, but you know, it's just a way to spend quality time with your child. And we underlook these things. But, go to a cooking class.
I took 4 classes. Welcome, my dear.
Absolutely.
Italian, fast typing.
Yes.
And,
Cake decorating, they do cake decorating. Yeah. It's just a lovely, lovely way to connect with your teenager, especially if you've lost the conversation and the thing, you just need to do that. So this is an important thing. What financial support do you get? So Ministry of Education, once you get the exemption, you are paid twice every year. It's not a lot of money, to be honest. It's not a lot of money, but it goes a long way, because let's be serious. If we were in our countries, we wouldn't get this. Okay? So let's not be childish. This is a lot of free money. So we are paid twice, in June and in December every year. And the first child, you get 743.
is that the whole year or?
The whole year.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole year. But if you consider that the other online program was paying 300 a year for all your children in one home. So you need to put it in perspective. It's not equivalent to the salary you're forfeiting. Obviously no, don't even compare. But I'm just saying, it is enough. It is enough for you to educate your child. It's actually more than enough, to be fair. So, and if you have a second child, they give you an extra 632. A third child, they give you 521. Any other children after that, you get an extra. So to be honest, there's enough to educate your family. There is, with even, community classes and all this swimming and boxing, whatever extracurricular you want. There really is. So, but it is not the same as you going to work. It will never be the same. That's why it's a sacrifice to do it. Also, if you have special education, like my children who are autistic, we get special, and I say special support. I'm being kind. You are on the list. Yes. And you get a phone call, maybe. Everyone says. So if you don't hustle, basically what I'm saying is, for everything you get, you have to hustle. You have to make yourself noisy to be remembered. It's like everything else. So knowing that it is there is good, because it's your starting point. Then you can start making noise. But if you don't know, no one tells you. You'll be on your own. No one tells you. So it's really you who needs to push, make the phone calls. Yeah.
They call the kiwi wheel squeak wheel.
Yeah, exactly. Squeaky. You have to be a squeaky wheel. You have to be. And if you're scared of being a squeaky wheel, you will not get the things that are supposed to be yours to get. What's the documentation? So that's the link for people who want to know the link to the ministry. That's the link. So you do get financial support, but again, there are forms to fill, the usual. Ideally, because the question people ask me, they'll be like, how do I know I'm covering everything? How do I know that I'm not missing something? Because we're not teachers. Well, some of us are teachers, but not all of us are teachers. But my guide is cover the basics. Make sure your child can read, write, and do arithmetic and count. Those are the basics. All these other things, if you teach your child to look for information, they will get it. Geography, if they're curious about where the equator is, they'll find out. Science, if they're curious about how their body works, they'll find out. For me, the core is do English, maths, then as an addition, science and social studies. Once you cover those, I feel your child has a very good foundation to go out into the world. and be anything they want to be. It's just a matter of diving into their area of interest. But obviously they need to know their maths back to front. They need to be able to write and communicate. That's vital. Because that's a skill, you know. This is the world we live in. That's what they need. Then all the other things, the science, the social studies, the geography, the history, all those interest subjects. You can learn them at your age. I don't know Genghis Khan. I can learn it today, this afternoon. You know, no one, why? Because I can read. You know, because I can write a paper. Because, you know, so the basics are those. And if they don't have those basics, then they're lost. Even though they're in school, if your child doesn't have those basics, take them out of school. Because they get to a point where it's hard to pull it back. They in their head, they convince themselves they're bad at maths. So how do you fight that? In their head, they've told themselves, there's no way I can understand. I can't spell. I'm a bad speller. And then this has been reinforced so many times that they actually believe it. So I took my child out of year 9 because he couldn't write. When we came, and that's the story probably of most of us, we had to work. My husband and I had to work. We had no money. We had to work. So we sent the kids to school. We were grateful for free education. I would go to parent-teacher meetings, and they would show me 3 pages, if I was lucky, of what he had done. And I'll be like, this whole town? What? And they'll give you stories of how he's at his age group. Like, you know, they say, oh, he's at par with his age group. Yeah. You tell him, write a letter to grandma, and he cannot write. So I told my husband, this is ridiculous. This child, he can't write his, what? So I said, we're going to sit at home and we're going to learn. And it was an uphill struggle. First they were telling me it was his handwriting. Because boys don't like to write, you know. But really he couldn't spell. And then we found out actually he was autistic and he was stimming. And when he was stimming, they would tell him go to the library because he was disrupting the class. So he was missing huge chunks of time going to the, because he was disrupting, you know, because they do this. He was disrupting the class, so we would send him to the library. And he loved the library, so he would just be in his corner quietly, and he had a space he liked. And so he was missing years of learning. So, like she said, ask them, how was school? What did you do today? What did you learn? Be inquisitive. Tell me, oh, you learned about digestion. Okay, tell me about it. What happens when you swallow food? What is it? Then you know that they're actually taking information in. But if you're just saying, oh, it was a good day, and then you walk away and you're happy about that, we need to be accountable. You know, don't leave your children, and then later on you wonder why. You know, but there's got to be some onus on us also to take this responsibility on ourselves. Also, when you're home, they've never come to my house to ask me what we've learned, but I still keep a record, because you never know. I still keep a record of whatever they learn. But also for yourself, for you to know that you're doing your job right, for you to be able to sit with yourself and say, yes, I'm doing a good job. So I encourage that. So I will talk through my sons, and I am so proud of my boys. This is my social butterfly, evidently. So right now he's in Sydney. He's doing very, very well. So he is the one who couldn't spell. Year 9. And all he was doing was being a social butterfly and being popular with the girls and, you know. So when you asked him, how was school? Oh, brilliant. Did you have fun? Oh my God, we went, we played, we we did this, that. I never thought to ask him, how was the lesson? Year 9, I had to, his granddad was very unwell. So I said, you have to write a letter. He was like, but mommy, I can type. I said, no, this is granddad. He loves receiving handwritten letters. My child couldn't write. I said, I could not believe it. And sure enough, you know, when I, with hindsight is 20/20. So when I realized that every time we went to parent-teacher meetings, they would show me this chart with you can't even read the thing, but they just say, oh, your child is over here, and according to his year level, la 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 la. When he would be given assignments, he would type. Okay? And then we have all these spell check, whatever. So that's how he was cruising through. But reality was he couldn't write. So we found out, and I said to him, I'm pulling you out of school. He was so unhappy. But that year that I spent with him, we did nothing but spelling every day like clockwork. I made him write so many essays. Essays we would read Black Beauty, and I would say, write about the book, write about the main characters. But he was mad. But that's the year I took. And then he went back to school. He repeated year 9. But that year consolidated everything. After that, he was acing all his subjects. He flew, like when he actually ended up going to uni. He was invited to go to Auckland University on scholarship. But after 1 year, he said, Mama, that's not for me. That is a blow for an African family to be told you're given a scholarship and you're saying no. My heart, I was like, child, we came all this way. We sacrificed the whole lecture. You know the lecture. So, but look at him now. He went away. He's a vain child. He loves good things. He started modeling. Modeling took him to Sydney. He started being creative. He models jewelry. He creates jewelry. He actually does art exhibitions. He's very arty. And he owns his own company, Wikipedia. And it's online. He's done amazing things. But he keeps coming back and saying, Mommy, whenever I'm bidding for a job or want to put in a tender or whatever, if you hadn't taught me how to write proposals, if you hadn't taught me how to write, this is what I mean. So even if you take your child from school, they're young, right? What's a year? Take them out, remedy that gap. Whatever, is it maths, is it science, is it writing, is it spelling, take a year out, patch that up, send them back. That boy has made a life, and every day he thanks me because he is who he is today, because he is confident. Can you imagine being an adult and not knowing how to write? Do you know how that knocks your confidence? He got a scholarship because he wrote, I think, 3,000-word essay to the Auckland University, and they gave him a scholarship based on his essay. So they're small things, but they're building blocks. My second son, this is Ethan. He's the autistic one, the one who was stimming, and they would send him to the library because he was disrupting the class. That's him now. He's in Kami. He's doing software engineering. We took him out of school. He was in, I think, year 7. Because that stimming thing, we found out about it, and we were like, he was not diagnosed, by the way. That's the other thing. As African parents, we don't know about autism. Well, I didn't know about it. I don't know if you guys know, but I didn't know. So I used to think he was a bit, he was quirky. He would throw a tantrum when he was younger. He would throw a tantrum if we didn't tell him things ahead of time. But he has always been socially awkward, so we just thought, he's a shy child, Actually, when he was in year 6, the principal of the school we were at said, get this child tested. We think he's on the spectrum. We're like, spectrum? What? He's not gay. but when we learned, when I went home and I Googled it, I was like, oh my God, yes, all the things that they say, autism. I was like, he's always been like that. And it all made sense. But when we took him from school, because school was overstimulating to him. So although he was still getting good grades, he struggled a lot. When he came home, wow, he thrived. He was in his element. And this is the one where when kids go down a rabbit hole and you just leave them to themselves, because he was already intelligent and he already had the foundation already. He could read, he could write, he had good at maths, everything. But then he said, Mommy, I want to do artificial intelligence. I'm like, what? He goes, Mommy, I'm going to do artificial intelligence, and he's educating me on artificial intelligence. I'm like, sweetheart, I do not know what you're talking about. Please. And he goes, they are online classes on artificial intelligence. At the time, there was nothing. And remember, he's a year 7. And I panicked. I'm like, my child doesn't know about history, doesn't know about science. What am I going to do? He can't, he won't know what, where Africa is in the world, the things we worry about are silly sometimes. With hindsight, you think back and you're like, why was I panicking? That child went online, found these online courses, and started doing them by himself. He would just come to you and say, Mommy, can you pay for this? Mommy, pay for this. And he made his own. He's very self-motivated. Like most autistic kids who are very tunnel-visioned, he would set his timetable, he would have an alarm, he would wake up at a certain time. God help you if you interrupted his timetable. He would have breakfast, go into his room, start his day. Come out for lunch, do his class. But right now, he's really, we worried that he was going to go all by himself. He had never left home. We worried about how he was going to settle in. He's fine. He's fine. Because at the end of the day, because he was home, when I would go shopping, I would go with him. We would talk about how much I had in terms of budget, what I needed to buy at the supermarket. I'd give him the money, and I would say, we need to prioritize, we don't have all the money, what do we do? Right now he's managing his own place. He lives alone. He can budget, he can save. He's got his Kiwi saver, he's got his savings in Heartlands. He actually was telling me, Mommy, the interest rates in Heartlands has gone up because he's already saving, There are things and conversations that we had with these children that we wouldn't have had if they were at school. Because we would sit at the table and would say, man, it's tough. How do we get that promotion? And they would pitch in because they knew what life was. It was real. So I am so very proud of him. My last boy, who's 10 now, he's also autistic. But because we now knew what to look out for, when he started to show the signs, I told my husband, this is another one. He is autistic. When he talks about building robots, he will tell you everything. He knows more about the subject than most adults. He will tell you what machine works best and why, and how the gear will move, and so on and so forth. So much so that we had to look for somebody who is an engineer. So some of the classes that he takes are engineering classes. Because obviously I teach him, he doesn't yet know English, so I teach him those basics, but we have the flexibility twice a week to get him to immerse himself into this. That's where his passion is. He is so confident. So he actually is the one who actually dealt with a lot of bullying. Because when he was in year 2, there was a little girl who decided he was interesting. So she would come and pull his dreads, and try to rub the black off his skin. And because he's quiet, take him to the bathroom to wash off the black.
Ooh.
So we found out about this and we went to the school and we said, this is not okay. The answer they gave us is, they're just children. So I said, okay, so if they're just children, can we talk to the parents? Because I don't want to talk to this little girl. What does she know? She's a child. Can we talk to the parents who can then translate to her at her level in their, the way they communicate at home to make them understand? And so they brought the parents and they made the girl write an apology letter. I'm like, okay, step 1, how do I make sure that this doesn't happen again? They took him in front of the assembly and said, this child, do not pick on him, and then it was like putting a big sticker of here I am. Pick on me, because it's like all the bullies now knew who to pick. Yeah, that's the new target. And when you say don't to children, what are you doing? What are you doing? We all know. We all know. Once you say don't, they're like, oh, don't. We'll just do it in a covert way. So every time I started to pick him up from school, he had tears. When they've cried and they have white, I was like, no. So I went to the principal and I said, really? And she said, okay, we will get a substitute teacher once a week to be with him. I'm like, So anyway, I just sat with my husband and I said, you know what? We just have to manage. We'll eat beans and bread for the next couple of months. But my child is not going to cry another day in his life. That's not okay. That is not okay. And then after we had left, they said, oh, we can bring in a counselor to mediate. Is that the word they use here? Mediate. Oh, we can mediate. I'm like, mediate with how many parents are we mediating with? When does it end? And for how long? Because you'll also get sick of us. Because every other week we'll come complaining about something new. So if, in the end, I said to the school, what you could do for me is actually write a letter to say, this is the situation, so that I can take it to the ministry as my reason of pulling my child out of school. So support me, at least in that. And they were nice enough, they were nice enough and they wrote the letter. It was, I don't think they wrote it graciously, but I think it was more about, what do we do, Yeah, there's no other choice. I was like, you can't protect my child? The least you can do is write me a letter. So they did that. But I do not regret that one single day. Because this child is the most confident child you will find. He knows his subject in and out, but he also knows he's different. That's the other thing. We've had conversations about what does it mean to be autistic. And when he's being overly himself, I'm like, sweetie, it's okay, you don't have to tell people your whole life story, because sometimes they don't know when to stop. So it's those social skills that I wouldn't, for example, be able to give him if he was not with me. So yes, that is my story. That is my experience. What I know is said very well by this man, John Taylor. The key to homeschooling is to be open-minded and willing to embrace new ideas and approaches to education. Now, whether you homeschool your child or send them to a traditional school, The most important thing always is to foster a love of learning and a curiosity about the world. When you do that, anything is possible. So, I invite you today. You know your homes, you know your children, you know your struggles. There's no right or wrong. It doesn't matter what you choose. As long as you end up having children who have a love of learning and they have a curiosity about the world, you have not gone wrong. And you cannot fail. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks very much for that presentation. It was very, very eye-opening. Yeah, that's actually the reason why I came, because I'm thinking about this on some level. How do we do this? You know, because some of these problems you have articulated, I've heard so much about it, and that's why I asked you that question, because I was even shocked that it's actually out there that New Zealand is one of the countries that has this problem to this level. So yeah. So so your last one, he's still being homeschooled right now.
Yes.
That's what you're still doing it.
Yes.
Okay. So the idea is that you've been doing this with the other, or especially the second one.
Yes.
You did that all the way through to when he was ready to go to uni.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. So the uni route is different universities. You work your way backwards.
Yeah.
So depending on where your child wants to go to university, even if they're in year 6 right now, if they have an idea of what they want to do, go to that university and say, what would you want a homeschooler to present you with to enter this program? You work backwards. So that is what we did when he was in year 11, the equivalent of year 11. We went to Master University and we said he wants to do software engineering. He's homeschooled. What would show you that he can manage your classes? And we also said he's autistic, We said all the things, and we said, well, people are so helpful. You just need to ask. We don't come from a culture of asking, sadly. But we need to change that. Just go to people and say, this is what I want, in good time. Don't wait until the last year. In good time, and say, I'm thinking of homeschooling, but I'm concerned. If my child wanted to come and join you and he was homeschooled, what would you need him to show you? Most of them will say, write an essay. Most of them will say, does he have a portfolio of learning? Or we want evidence that he has done A, B, C, D, or he can do. Lots of them have pre-uni classes. There's so many ways to skin a horse. Like, you just need to ask. And if you don't know, you don't know. But at least you know, then you're working from a place of knowledge. Yeah, that's all I can check, My son got a scholarship, he wasn't even there, it was like, no, this is not for me, this is not what I thought it was. And he moved on and he's made a life for himself. So we are stuck in this thing of education is the way upwards. It's not. It just isn't. There's so many people who have their degrees and they never even use them. So find out what your child is passionate in and facilitate that. That's a better way of doing things.
I wanted to ask, what are some of the challenges that the children that come from homeschooling and they are going to uni, what are some of the challenges they face? And also to know how do you evaluate them when they are doing homeschooling? To see if they are progressing with the kids going to normal.
So like I said, it all depends on the method you're using. Some people use unschooling, like I said, but other people use very structured. So if you get a tutor, for example, the tutor will obviously set exams. There are certain curriculums that come with tests incorporated within the curriculum. There are also tests. Tekura, for example, the one that I said is absolutely free. Tekura gives them tests and assignments. Yeah, and assignments and everything. They do NCEA. They actually sit NCEA. They do. So they do. The only difference is that it's from home. That's the only difference. Because remember, there are bullies and there are kids who've been bullied that have to use Tekura. So they have to give them quality education just like you would if you were in a school.
I don't know if there's something I need to share, because you are West African, so because I'm from Nigeria.
Yeah.
So for a period in our country, actually most people were actually doing some variation of homeschooling,
Yeah.
because it was difficult to get like adults, you know, when I say adults, I mean people that are heading into adulthood, to actually sit down, you know, in the class when their parents would require them to go to the farm or help in the kitchen and things. So many of our people actually went through some form of homeschool, and they just wrote these exams, this GCE and the primary school exam. All
My
these
husband is a lawyer. He did correspondence school.
Yeah, you know.
Like
So,
even
yeah.
in classes.
yes, things like that, you know.
Yeah. So it's basically the same thing.
It's the same thing.
It's just deciding which correspondence school you want to subscribe to. That's all. You can just subscribe to the UK, you can subscribe to America, you can subscribe to New Zealand. It's really up to you. Or you might not subscribe, because some kids decide to do apprenticeships instead. You know, if they want to be carpenters, for example, why would you struggle? The only people I'm talking about is the ones who go to university, but you can be an apprentice. You know, lots of kids have gone through apprenticeships and become, you know, whatever, mechanics or you name it, builders, whatever, and they've gotten trades, and actually they start earning way before their contemporaries who are in university start earning.
So does homeschooling has a limit, like from within this age to this, like?
No, absolutely not. It's really, as long as you've got the legal permission from the government to do it.
No, I mean like to what extent, like from kinder to when you are 16 years, 15 years? Or...
It's like correspondence school. Is there a limit? There's no limit. There's no limit. It's your pocket. It's your pocket that limits you.
That's good.
Yeah, there's no limit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
That's good.
What we might do, just because we need to probably, if there's any further questions, what we might do is put into these three.
I'm
Yes,
available.
after this.
Yeah, I'm
After that.
available.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much for your resilience to educate your sons and you know, reach this point where they are now successful.
Thank you.
Secondly, I have one question. So, in schools, I have seen in the past that when my kids were younger, now they are all moved on. I have 3 adults. And during those times, there were times where they were asked to join classes where I thought these classes are not really essential to their education in the future. And I have noticed immigrants and refugees, when they go to schools, high school and intermediate, they are encouraged to join those classes where they have to do baking and these whole classes, even though the kids are born in New Zealand, because my kids born in New Zealand, and they had the same equivalent English and knowledge in terms of, you know, doing their assignment. When people see they look different in terms of color, and hijab and all that, people simply assume, okay, they are East, or they maybe don't know the language, so they are put into those classes. What's your experience, and have you taught in your teaching those classes were not actually essential to what your son is needed?
First of all, when you homeschool, when you put in the plan, you put in things that are important to you. Okay, so for me, one of the subjects that they don't even list on the thing was culture education. For me, it's vital that they know who they are, because without that, who are you? Especially because, not only because they are boys, but because they're so far away from home. Like if they don't get it from me, where are they going to get it? So for me, I added that. And you can put whatever you want. If you want a religious thing, I know Koreans put in learning to write Korean, because it's very, you know. So it's really up to you, but what they look for is the fundamentals, the you know, English, mathematics, and writing, those core things. At the end of the day, you can play around with it. You can even justify, if you want to justify removing something, it depends on how you argue it. You can say that's not relevant because, and it's a dialogue. It's not a rigid thing. It's really a conversation. So it's understanding that and continually having that dialogue with the ministry, with the people who are in authority, so that they understand where you're at. And even if when things change, just to communicate that to them, to say, you know, my son who is into robotics, I said, I'm going to start him on engineering classes because he is really interested in this area. Because no child his age is doing that, you know. So, but they're like, oh, okay, if you justify and you have a good reason, absolutely, 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Denise, for that very insightful presentation. I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Thank you so much for coming lunch. It's getting ready for children first, as usual. And they're just getting ready. So as soon as they're served, we'll let you know. The adults can come up and serve themselves. I just want to thank Narisara. I pronounced her name wrongly this morning. It's one of the ladies who take care of the children.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you, ladies, for taking care of the children.
Let's start with that slide. Like,
Yes.
So what I'll do is I'll jump ahead because she's got all your emails.
Ah, excellent. No, that's great. That's great. Yes, please. Everything.